Welcome to Mr. Night Scare, where we uncover the darkest tales of true crime and the chilling mysteries that keep you up at night. If you love unraveling the twisted stories behind the world's most infamous criminals, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Get ready to dive into a world where every shadow hides a secret. Let's begin. In the summer of 1985, fear blanketed Los Angeles. The city, known for its glitz and glamour, became a hunting ground for a man whose name would forever be etched into the annals of crime history. Richard Ramirez. Dubbed the Night Stalker by the media, Ramirez's reign of terror was marked by his brutal and random attacks that defied all logic and comprehension. His crimes were not just about murder, they were about instilling fear, chaos, and a chilling sense of helplessness. Born on February 29, 1960 in El Paso, Texas, Richard Ramirez's early life was a cocktail of abuse, neglect, and exposure to violence. This dark upbringing would mold him into a predator who would later haunt the streets of California. As we dive into the story of Richard Ramirez, we will uncover the twisted mind of a man whose crimes shocked the world and whose trial became a spectacle of horror and disbelief. Richard Ramirez, the youngest of 5 children, was born to Julian and Mercedes Ramirez. His father, a former police officer in Mexico, worked as a laborer on the railroads in the United States. While Julian was hardworking, he was also prone to fits of rage and violence, which often led to physical abuse within the household. Mercedes, while more nurturing, struggled with health issues due to exposure to toxic chemicals during her pregnancies, which some believe may have affected Richard's development. As a child, Ramirez suffered from multiple head injuries. One incident involved a dresser falling on him, causing him to require stitches, while another occurred when he was struck in the head by a swing. These injuries, combined with epileptic seizures he experienced in his early years, may have contributed to neurological issues that influenced his behavior later in life. A pivotal figure in Ramirez's life was his older cousin, Miguel, or Mike. A Vietnam War veteran, Mike regaled young Richard with horrifying tales of his wartime exploits, including graphic stories of torture and murder. Mike even showed him photographs of his victims, which included women he had assaulted and killed. These gruesome accounts fascinated Richard and desensitized him to violence. Mike's influence took a darker turn when, during an argument with his wife, he shot her in the face in front of Richard. This traumatic event, coupled with Richard's already tumultuous life, pushed him further down a dark path. By his teenage years, Ramirez had developed a fascination with Satanism, a belief system that would later become a hallmark of his crimes. In his late teens, Ramirez dropped out of high school and moved to Los Angeles. Here he began dabbling in petty crimes such as theft and burglary to sustain himself. His criminal activities escalated over time, and he became adept at breaking into homes. These early crimes served as a prelude to the horrors that would follow. Ramirez's descent into full-fledged criminality was fueled by his drug use, particularly cocaine. He spent nights wandering the streets, high and searching for opportunities to satisfy his dark urges. By the time he committed his first known murder in 1984, Ramirez had already embraced a life of crime and violence. On June 28, 1984, 79-year-old Jenny Vincow was found brutally murdered in her Los Angeles apartment. She had been stabbed repeatedly, and her throat was slashed so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. The crime scene was horrific, and investigators noted the lack of forced entry, suggesting the killer had gained access through an open window. This marked the beginning of Ramirez's killing spree. Over the next year, Ramirez embarked on a campaign of terror across Southern California. His crimes were characterized by their randomness and brutality. Unlike most serial killers, Ramirez did not have a specific victim profile. His victims ranged in age from 9 to 83 and included both men and women. This unpredictability made him particularly dangerous and difficult to track. Ramirez's modus operandi involved breaking into homes in the dead of night, earning him the moniker the Night Stalker. He would enter through unlocked windows or doors, armed with a variety of weapons, including knives, guns, and blunt objects. Once inside, he unleashed unimaginable violence, often torturing his victims before killing them. In some cases, he sexually assaulted his female victims, leaving behind a trail of physical and emotional devastation. Ramirez also left behind symbols of his allegiance to Satan. At some crime scenes, he drew pentagrams on walls or on his victims' bodies. He would also force his victims to swear their allegiance to Satan, further adding a layer of psychological terror to his crimes. As the body count grew, so did the fear among residents of Los Angeles. The randomness of Ramirez's crimes meant that no one felt safe. People began locking their doors and windows, purchasing firearms, and forming neighborhood watch groups. The media coverage of the Night Stalker was relentless, and the city was gripped by paranoia. The police, meanwhile, were under immense pressure to catch the killer. Investigators from various jurisdictions collaborated to connect the dots between the murders, sexual assaults, and burglaries. A significant breakthrough came when a survivor provided a description of the attacker, which led to the creation of a composite sketch. Ramirez's downfall began with a careless mistake. On August 24, 1985, he entered the home of Bill Carnes and Inez Erickson in Mission Viejo. After shooting Carnes and assaulting Erickson, Ramirez fled the scene, unaware that neighbors had spotted his car and noted the license plate number. The car, a stolen orange Toyota, was later found abandoned, but it provided investigators with a crucial piece of evidence: a single fingerprint on the rearview mirror. Using newly developed computer technology, the fingerprint was matched to Richard Ramirez, a 25-year-old drifter with a long criminal record. His mugshot was released to the public, and the manhunt for the Night Stalker intensified. On August 31, 1985, Ramirez was spotted in East Los Angeles. A group of residents recognized him from the mugshot and pursued him. In a dramatic turn of events, they subdued him until police arrived. Ramirez's capture marked the end of his reign of terror, and the city breathed a collective sigh of relief. Ramirez's trial was a media spectacle, drawing attention from across the nation. His appearance in court was marked by his defiance and lack of remorse. He often smirked and flashed a pentagram he had drawn on his palm, declaring, "Hail Satan." The trial lasted over 4 years and involved more than 100 witnesses. Ramirez was convicted of 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 counts of sexual assault, and 14 counts of burglary. In 1989, he was sentenced to death. Upon hearing his sentence, Ramirez famously remarked, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." Richard Ramirez's crimes left an indelible mark on the history of American crime. He became a symbol of pure evil, a predator who thrived on chaos and fear. His story has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and even television series, cementing his place in the dark annals of true crime. While Ramirez died of natural causes on death row in 2013, the scars he left behind remain. For the victims and their families, the nightmare of the Night Stalker will never truly end. His story serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most unassuming of faces. The small towns and villages of Ukraine are known for their close-knit communities, where neighbors trust each other and strangers are welcomed with warm hospitality. But during the mid-1990s, this sense of safety was shattered by a name that would come to symbolize fear: Anatoly Onoprienko. Entire families were wiped out overnight, their homes set ablaze, their lives stolen in the most horrific ways imaginable. Random yet calculated, brutal yet methodical, Onoprienko embarked on a killing spree that claimed the lives of 52 innocent people. By the time the authorities caught up with him, his name had become synonymous with terror, and his story would haunt Ukraine for generations. What drives a man to such extremes? What creates a monster capable of such calculated brutality? This is the story of Anatoly Onoprienko, a man whose actions made him one of the world's most infamous serial killers. Anatoly Yuryovich Onoprienko was born on July 25, 1959 in Lasky, a small Ukrainian village. His early years were marred by tragedy when his mother died when he was just 4 years old. Unable to cope with raising 2 children, his father placed Anatoly in an orphanage. This sense of abandonment would shape his psyche, planting the seeds of anger and resentment that would fester into something far more sinister in adulthood. The orphanage provided little solace. Onoprienko was known to be introverted and withdrawn, often avoiding interactions with the other children. He harbored deep-seated feelings of rejection, both toward his family and society at large. The rigid environment of the orphanage, coupled with his growing mistrust of others, created a young man who felt disconnected from the world around him. As Onoprienko grew older, he exhibited increasingly erratic behavior. He struggled to maintain jobs and relationships, frequently turning to petty crime to survive. His encounters with the law were minor at first, involving thefts and burglaries. But by the late 1980s, Onoprienko's criminal activities began to take a darker turn. Onoprienko's descent into mass murder began in 1989. His first known victims were two men he encountered during a burglary. Instead of fleeing, Onoprienko decided to eliminate any potential witnesses. This marked the beginning of a pattern that would define his reign of terror, breaking into homes, robbing his victims, and then killing everyone inside to ensure no witnesses remained. For a time, Onoprienko's activities seemed to pause. He disappeared from law enforcement's radar, living a transient lifestyle that took him across Europe. He returned to Ukraine in the early 1990s, and it was then that his killing spree escalated to an unprecedented level. Between 1995 and 1996, Onoprienko murdered 43 people across Ukraine. His method was chillingly consistent. He would select isolated homes in rural areas, break in during the night, and massacre everyone inside. No one was spared. Men, women, children, and even pets were brutally slaughtered. Onoprienko often used a variety of weapons, including firearms, knives, and blunt objects, and he showed no hesitation in carrying out his crimes. The randomness of his attacks made him nearly impossible to track. Onoprienko would strike in one town, then travel hundreds of miles to commit his next set of murders. This unpredictability created a wave of fear that swept across Ukraine. Villagers began barricading their doors and windows, keeping weapons close at hand, and living in constant fear of the next attack. The Ukrainian police were overwhelmed by the sheer brutality and randomness of Onoprienko's crimes. With no clear pattern to his murders, investigators struggled to connect the dots. The media began dubbing him the Terminator, a name that only heightened public fear. The turning point in the investigation came when Onoprienko made a critical mistake. After murdering a family in a small village, he left behind a trail of evidence, including a firearm that was later traced back to him. Authorities also received tips from locals who had spotted a suspicious man near the crime scenes. In April 1996, law enforcement tracked Onoprienko to a relative's home in the town of Zhytomyr. When police raided the house, they found a treasure trove of evidence linking him to the murders, including weapons, stolen items, and personal belongings of his victims. Onoprienko was arrested without incident, and his reign of terror finally came to an end. During his trial, Onoprienko shocked the court with his lack of remorse. He admitted to the murders, describing them in chilling detail. His calm and emotionless demeanor only added to the horror of his crimes. When asked why he committed such atrocities, Onoprienko claimed he was guided by an internal voice that compelled him to kill. He also blamed his actions on his troubled childhood and his belief that he was destined to carry out these crimes. The story of Anatoly Onoprienko left an indelible mark on Ukraine. His crimes shattered the sense of safety and trust that once defined rural life. To this day, his name is synonymous with evil, and his story serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the human soul. If you've heard of any other chilling serial killers or mysterious crimes, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends who love true crime, and hit that subscribe button to join our journey into the darkest corners of history. Your support helps us uncover and share these haunting stories. Stay safe, and see you in the next one.